All right, well, welcome to Herceg Novi Strip Festival. I have the absolute pleasure to be joined here by Gene Ha. Gene,
And
welcome.
I'm delighted to be interviewed by you, Andrew, even though you are not the hot priest.
I'm so sorry about that.
I actually, when they first told me you were interviewing me, I had to do a little research to make sure you weren't the hot priest.
Yes, I know. I let everyone down, really. Just one day, if I ever meet him, he's going to be as shocked and disappointed as everybody else, really.
You would make an excellent hot priest.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hey, look, I'm only young. Maybe one day.
Yeah.
Change careers. So, this year you were awarded your 5th Eisner Award. How was that? How does it feel?
The thing about me winning Eisners, so 5 Eisners, all of them are for the issue or the title. I have never won an Eisner for any form of best artist.
Okay.
So it's it's essentially I am the player on a championship football team,
Right.
but I'm never the all-star of any of those teams.
Well, yeah, you talked about contributing
Yeah.
to these Eisner Awards. And things.
I like to pick projects where by the writer, and I work with great writers, and then we work on great stories that sometimes win an Eisner, and that's part of the reason why I can think of a few other artists who are at least as talented as me who don't win the awards,
Right.
because they don't work with those type of writers that much.
Well, so you've got a bit of the nous to you about choosing writers there.
Oh yeah, I pick good coattails.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. But I mean, this particular project, Wonder Woman Historia, it's well, in my opinion anyway, it's giving Wonder Woman this kind of renaissance. It's we had the first one with obviously it's Kelly Sue DeConnick and with Phil Jimenez on the first one and now you. What's it like to be a part of this renaissance and add something new to this classic character?
When I was working on it, it was terrifying.
I imagine. Yeah.
Let me see. Okay, so I compared so I loved their work before I saw what they were doing on Wonder Woman Historia, and then I saw what they were doing, and it's kind of like, oh, they both stepped it up, and especially like Phil, I feel like we were a very equal in skills, and like I can follow on from him, and then I saw no one has drawn anything like this ever in serial comics, only
insane.
a single illustrations. It's so complex.
Yeah.
I call it the team up of Margaret Atwood writing a screenplay for Stanley Kubrick and Alexander McQueen to film.
Yeah.
And then I'm just like your journeyman director, like, and I got to do the sequel?
Yeah, that's gonna.
I've got my skills.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What an act to follow, really. But I mean, obviously, what you did, you really stepped up, and you kept the height of quality in it.
Oh yeah,
outstanding.
But I could not do the same tricks Phil did. That was singular.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it's different strokes for different folks, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and then Nicola coming on board and seeing like, oh, they stepped, and then she stepped up too, and it's just like, it was a wonderful team to be part of.
Well, that's the thing with these kind of creative teams. It's instead of it being a kind of a competitive environment, often it's motivating, to make you step up your game.
Yeah, Phil gave me so much help and advice all along the way of just like how he did things, what he was planning on doing, but the thing is, he was working up till he started almost a year before I did, and he only finished 3 months before I did.
Right.
And he kept on making things more elaborate as I went along. So I'd base something on his early version, and then he'd finish it a few months later. He'd go back and forth between pages, and he'd be like, oh no, I based it on your preliminary drawing. Your finished version is much more complicated.
Right. So then did you have to go back and try and add some more detail?
I needed to make my deadline. I wasn't going to do that.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, what an honor as well, and to be part of this team and bring something new to Wonder Woman. How do they keep adding so much freshness?
Yeah, the amazing amount of so Kelly Sue DeConnick, the thing that amazed me, never having worked with her before, is the trust she had in her artists, where she asked us to solve some type of storytelling problem where she didn't know the solution.
Oh, really?
And also, she would throw problems at herself where she didn't know how she was going to handle it. And she just trusted that if I try to emotionally and and also according to Greek myth and history and all that, just throw everything in there that I want to kind of build from.
Yeah.
I'll figure out what to build on top of that next myself. And but she didn't know all the solutions herself early on. No. And like there's one scene where she wanted me to draw a double-page spread of Hera, angry but also mournful about a history of 2,000 years at least of injustice against women, and then 2,000 years. 1,000 years of injustice against women she'd seen, and then she could foresee, as this all-seeing goddess, 2,000 more years of it to come. And I needed to represent that with Hera, feathers, and birds.
Wow.
And she didn't tell me how to do it.
That's it. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so going on from there, I've created the scene. You can look up the comic book page if you want, or you can drop in a flash of it or something like that.
Yes,
but
I hope so, yeah.
There was a lot of scenes, sequences like that where it's like she knew that I would come up with a solution, but she had no idea what it would be. And I didn't, when I read the script, I didn't know what it was going to be.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
I suppose that's a great way of avoiding, simple formulaic stories as well. To have these kind of big question marks right in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that philosophy before. Like Stephen King believes in that in writing. He doesn't plot too forward. Alan Moore is very much on that too. But Kelly Sue took it to the next level. But also, she always stepped up, and she knew we were going to step up. And I've never had a writer who so trusted artists to do things they've never done before.
Right.
And to make it work so well. And just she is such an inspiring captain of just like, you're going to become great. Greater than you've ever been before at something I don't know how to tell you to do it. And it's like, I would never tell someone to do that, but she made it work. It's brilliant.
That is brilliant. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier about choosing the right writers. Not for coattails, but the really, really great writers. So I wanted to ask you, you personally working with a writer, what is it that, in your opinion, makes for a great script?
Well, I mean, okay, of course you have to have a writer who has the skills to tell the story. And sometimes it's because they structure things so much. Sometimes it's because they bring so much emotional authenticity to it in a way that other people wouldn't know how to do. But they have to love. They have to love the story to really tell that great story. And even if I don't say love the character already, or it's not a story where I know how to tell it or anything like that, that passion then feeds into my art and lets me do things I wouldn't be able to do otherwise without that writer telling the story. Sure. This isn't my part of the story, but in the Phil and Kelly Sue's part of the story, Phil has a similar sequence done with totally different elements, talking about the history of injustice against women. Yeah. And they wanted to represent it, they decided they were going to represent it as Voss paintings. But in Kelly Sue's script, she notes, we don't want to make this essentially torture porn. Right, yeah. So there's all these scenes of these horrible things happening to women based on the Vosses. And if you've seen a very complete catalog of like a museum's catalog of Greek Voss paintings and bowl paintings and stuff like that, there are some really creepy scenes on there that they do not put inside of standard art history books.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly like the things Phil was doing in.
Yeah.
And they are torture porn.
Yeah, of course.
But they took the female figures and they did them as red silhouettes to both highlight them, but also to kind of make you look at it a little more cerebrally, and just kind of, and also take away the torture porn aspect of it. And it was just kind of a brilliant little solution to it.
Yeah, just come at it from a different angle so as to...
just make you step at it from a different angle. It's not a solution I would ever come up with myself.
Sure, but and that way you don't lose the authenticity either.
Yeah.
It's a really good idea.
Yeah, because there's a period 20 years before I worked on Historia where I actually was in the Minneapolis Public Library and just randomly found a book on Greek Voss paintings. Like, oh, this will be nice. And it's like, what the
yeah, they can get pretty gnarly, really. Yeah. Well, I mean, you were talking about the passion, and you yourself are a writer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You forgot about that. I mean, May is absolutely wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
It's really wonderful, and it's wonderful to see artists come into their own as writers as well. How was that transition for you to go from kind of work for hire and then working on your own thing.
Well, I should mention the first time I'm not going to name the writer, but not he's a great writer, but I'm not going to mention him because it's an embarrassing little story. Okay. The first time I got a chance to write my own story was I was asked to do a Marvel Knights story with editor Stuart Moore. He'd let me pick my writer. I picked my writer who I wanted to work with. And a week before the deadline for the scripts, the writer stopped answering his phone and responding to emails.
Oh.
So Stuart Moore said, well, it's a two-person team and there's only one of you left. You're the writer now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How did that feel?
I was overconfident.
Really?
Yes, I was like, I've worked with great writers. I know scripts. I know how to draw a story. I can write one easy too.
Yeah.
And Stuart Moore was such a saint because he had to take me through 5 drafts of the story, explaining to me like different ways of looking at the story and how it has to be able to stand up to scrutiny or different types of readers. Like he really brought across the point to me that, have you looked at this from this aspect? It was an Iron Fist story. You know, he's gone through there's religious training with these monks. He's a very moral person. Is he going to just stand by and let this injustice happen? Have you looked at this from the viewpoint of the villain? Have you looked at the viewpoint of the victims? Have you looked from the cops? Is the cops' actions make sense based on what they're seeing? And he just 5 different drafts. He finally like, okay, I think he finally kind of looked at it from all of these viewpoints, and he taught me. Stuart Moore, thank you, Stuart Moore. He taught me how little the things I didn't know, which I did when I overconfidently first came into writing the script. It was like, this will be easy, and it's like 5th draft later is like, writing is hard.
Yeah, but that's a real trial by fire as well. You know, you were thrown in right to the deep end.
Oh yeah, and then yes, but that was a 12-page story.
Right.
May was my next writing project, and I was less overconfident now, so I had advice from friends, like I ran the story past Tim Seeley, and people would point out things. But I also definitely know that by the 12th issue of May, I had learned things I did not know before, and I was a much stronger writer.
Yeah, well, that's again. I mean, this is quite masochistic. You've put yourself through 2 trials by fires. But I mean, yeah, and you can see how May grows over the course of the issues.
Yeah, I knew where I wanted to get the characters to. I didn't know how they were going to get there. Yeah. And it's a story about 2 sisters, an older sister who, before the story starts, and they both live in modern-day Indiana. Before the story starts, the older sister at the age of 13 disappears. And there's no note, there's no crime scene or anything like that. She just disappears. And the younger sister doesn't know where she went. And then she comes back 8 years later. The younger sister is 18, the older sister 21. And she says she's been in another world fighting mad scientists and monsters and leading barbarian warrior cats into battle. And the younger sister doesn't believe it until some of the monsters follow her back to Indiana. Their dad disappears, and then they have to go to the other world to figure out who took him where he went. And the younger sister has all these, if you kind of lose a family member and they suddenly reappear, you have all this dream life you wish you'd had with them. And there's, as a younger sister, she already hero worshipped her older sister. And now that she's come back as an actual action hero, she really does it. But then also they start to see each other's weaknesses and flaws, and it takes them a long time to actually both respect each other. And May is someone who tends to overthink things and look at things from a broader perspective. And the older sister, Abby, is looking for the person to punch to fix the problem. And not every problem can be solved by punching things.
Yeah.
And that is very much a commentary on American foreign policy.
Yeah, I didn't put that together.
Oh, it was very inspired by the Gulf War.
Is that right?
Yeah, the Gulf War. Yeah, it was just like, we need to just stop punching everybody who looks like the American Hollywood idea of what a terrorist looks like. Right. Because some of these are just perfectly normal shopkeepers or school teachers or stuff like that. And we're shooting too many.
Right, yeah. Put your fists away.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's also like the thing with American superhero comics when it deals with street crime. It's just like, if I just keep on punching enough people who look like criminals, crime will go away. And it's kind of like, that's never worked.
Yeah, we're in 2024 now. We've got to think of some alternative theories.
Yeah, so it's very much a commentary on both that real American reality and also that American storytelling way of solving problems of find a problem like famine or plague, then put it in tights and punch it.
Right. See, that's something I really enjoyed about it too, because you I mean, it starts off, incredibly fast. We get to know May a little bit, and then Abby arrives on the scene, and then whoosh, we're into the thick of the story. But what you do is you kind of pepper, the relationship and particularly May's kind of realization that she doesn't really know her sister.
Yeah.
Not just in terms of now she's a axe hammer wielding badass, but she hasn't seen her for 7 years, I think it was, and so you kind of unravel the complexities of this story over a number of issues, and it really works out beautifully.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention something. I don't think I've ever mentioned this in a podcast before. When I was 25 years old, my older brother passed away, and he was very much kind of an action hero kind of guy, but he was also an alcoholic, and it just destroyed him. But he was the kind of guy, when he walked into the room, people just said, oh, he's cool.
Yeah.
And he was also a guy who could, if he got into a fight with a guy who was muscular and 30 pounds heavier than him, he'd win.
Which is, I mean, this is...
not me. I can go with the muscular guy my weight, and he's going to kick my ass.
right. But that's kind of how May sees Abby. How Abby is really. She's a badass.
Yeah.
And I love a little bit later on in the story. You kind of see her kind of initial time in this other world and how she became this badass. It's wonderful. One thing I did want to ask you though is in fantasy, a lot of fantasy writers tend to lean on languages like Old English or Welsh and the Nordic languages for their otherworldly language, and you leaned on Czech.
Part of that was just okay. So I didn't want to go Old English because I grew up inside of a subdivision in America where everything had names like Foxcross and Knollwood and Lincroft. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want it to sound like that kind of cheesy American suburban street thing.
Sure.
Or appliance products have names like that in the United States. It just, I didn't want to go with Swedish or German because then it all sounded to me like heavy metal stuff.
Right, yes.
And then I began looking at different languages, and Czech just sounded wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's how I lent into that. And also I love the history of Czechia. Mm-hmm. One of the funniest but most and weirdly admirable things about the Czechs is they have almost no martial glory. They've almost won no major battles ever in their history. They keep on getting their butts kicked.
Yeah.
But through being very philosophical and having the driest sense of humor in the world, they've kept their culture and their people together.
Right.
It's amazing that they're still around.
It is incredible, with a real identity, a strong cultural identity.
Oh yeah, they're great. The name of the world that Abby visits is called, please forgive me, anyone who speaks Czech, Simrtern.
Okay.
And it was discovered by a man called Jaroš Zimmerman. Right. He named it after himself.
Sure.
And he is the greatest Czech in all of history. But he was invented, I think, in the 1960s under communism by the national broadcaster, where they'd be doing little history shorts, talking about, let's do another segment about the greatest Czech in all of history, Jaroš Zimmerman. And this is how he invented the telegraph or the telephone 1 day after Alexander Bell did.
Sure.
And all these great things he did that almost made world history, but it didn't quite. But he never existed. Oh, wow. And it drove the censors crazy because they didn't know how to complain about these segments about this fictional historical figure.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And like now in Prague, like the National Theater is named after him. It has a bust of him, and there's like biographical movies about him.
No way, I've never heard of this.
Yeah, and I thought this is the perfect person to found the doorways to this other world, and they named it after himself.
Oh, that's an ideal name for your comic as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right, well, I suppose I have to ask the most important question. What projects your future projects, can you tell us about? And what can you tell us, even just a slight part?
So like recently, Gail Simone announced that we are working together on a spin-off from Patton Oswalt's Minor Threats.
Okay.
And we're going to do one issue about Crab Louie with an E at the end instead of an S.
All right.
Who is a giant bipedal crab man. He's kind of the Swamp Thing of crustaceans instead of trees and weeds. And the thing that freaked me out about his face for like the first week I was studying the character is that his eye holes are formed by two actual lobsters with their claws out, going nose to nose and their claw to claw. And I was thinking about it more and more. It's like, those aren't just decorational. Those are living lobsters on his face.
Right.
Stuck forever looking at another lobster in the face.
That's a weird kind of eternal torture.
Yeah. And I had to buy some, I bought some toy reference, very, very realistic lobsters so I could put them face to face with each other when I have to start drawing them.
All right, that's going to be an interesting project to be working on.
Yeah, now it's starting to all work together, and it's just like, I mean, it's the concept of like the angels in heaven who sit by the throne of God.
Right.
And they're just stuck to the face of God forever.
Well, that sounds fantastic. I look forward to that. Well, you've been in Hesig Novi for a couple of days now.
Yes.
What do you think about the town and the festival so far?
It's, okay, so I read some about Montenegro before I got here, and the population of the whole country is smaller than Indianapolis.
Right. Oh, wow, Indianapolis, not
Yeah.
just Indiana. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it's
Okay.
so it's a community. It's it's a community of people who they kind of all know each other. They have they have the arguments and stuff like that, like Indianapolis. But they're all tied together by this culture. This I'm not going to say everyone has a love of arts, but there's such a passionate love of arts here, and such insane talent. And then they're part of course, of the whole Balkan community, and the talent in this place is just insane. Like, I know very few German comic book artists, and like very few, say, Dutch comic book artists. But there are so many superstar comic artists who've come out of this region, and you come down here and meet them and see some of the young artists, and it's kind of like, they're so good. There's so much good art here, and so much love of good art here. It's a little bit humbling, and I'm a little jealous. Going back to Indianapolis and Indiana, like, not only is the population of this country smaller than Indiana, it's smaller than the capital city of Indiana. But there are very few comic book artists and very few comic book writers in the whole state of Indiana. Right. And this place is just filled with talent.
Yeah, jam-packed.
Yeah, it's fantastic seeing something like this.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's wonderful to have you here, and I'm sure you'll be welcome absolutely anytime you want to kind of appease that jealousy and take a break over here with all these comics lovers. Gene, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you and speak to you today. And thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure confessing to the real hot priest.
Oh, well, yes. Thank you very much, Gene. Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Really, that was great. Okay.